Good evening, one and all. It's Michael from BroJMR, and I'm back with a brand new episode of MMR, Michael's Movie Reviews. This is something I plan on doing on a weekly basis from here on out, and so enjoy the very first review in such a long time. So that's right, this week I am reviewing Tenacious D's The Pick of Destiny. This was a super funny film. It was released November 22nd, 2006. It had a budget of $20 million. It only grossed domestically $8.3 million, worldwide with another 5.6 roughly. So $13.9 million. It was a loss. Matter of fact, Jack Black has said he would never write another script again based on the loss of this that this movie took in the theater, which is really sad because, you know, he's so funny, and you know, he has the potential to, you know, have some really funny stuff. I mean, just look at all of Tenacious D's music. It's so funny, and this movie is hilarious. I don't understand why it didn't do better in the theaters. You know, hey, you know, there's only so much one person can do. There's only so many times one person can go see a movie, and unfortunately, I didn't even discover this movie until later when it came out on DVD. So, Jack, I'm sorry your movie didn't make more money in the theaters, but hey, it was hilarious. It was released on home video February 27, 2007. That's exactly 3 months and 5 days later. That was a super short turnaround time. I mean, even now we have short turnaround times, but for that, you know, for 10 years ago, that was a really short turnaround time. For those of you who have never seen Tenacious D and The Pick of Destiny, number one, you're missing out on a funny film. And let me give you the quick rundown of what the plot is. Jack Black and Kyle Gass, they play themselves, and it's basically a road trip type movie. Well, the second half is a road trip type movie. The first half is more of kind of like a forming of the band itself. But they're going on a road trip to go find this mysterious pick of destiny, which, according to legend, is Satan's tooth that a dark wizard fashioned into a pick. So originally, a mandolin player could woe his lady love, and it's passed down, you know, throughout the years. You know, it goes missing for a while, and you know, so the pick eventually, you know, makes its way, you know, into modern day times where every great guitarist has ever used it, and that's how they have their chops, and that's how, you know, that's how they're able to rock, is this mysterious pick. And so they, being Tenacious D, are going to break into the rock and roll, what do they call it? The Rock and Roll History Museum, in order to steal the pick so they can write a masterpiece and win this open mic night so they can get money to pay the rent on their apartment. They learn a lot about themselves, you know. It has the typical story arc where, you know, friends, you know, they fight in the middle of it and they split off in their separate ways and they come back at the end. But in the end, they end up having to have a rock off with Satan himself, and it's a real Devil Went Down to Georgia type situation, and it's really, really funny because the story that's being told is told through the song that they're playing, and it's just the most ridiculous thing ever, but it's so funny. And you know, they eventually come out, they win. They do not have the pick of destiny anymore, but you know, they come out of the rock off with a new artifact called the Bong of Destiny. And this is how they are going to write a masterpiece. That's just a quick rundown of the film. So I want to tell you a little bit of trivia from the film before we get into talking about the cast and some of the cameos. The guitar played by Satan in the Beelzebub sequence is a custom Washburn guitar designed by Dimebag Darrell. There is also a scene where a bar patron is wearing a shirt that says the Great Alaska Bush Company. And that is actually a world-renowned strip club in Anchorage, Alaska, which is one of Jack Black's favorite places to go whenever he's in the state. And I don't remember that place when I lived in Anchorage. Of course, it may not have been there yet, and of course I was a little young, so Mom and Dad would not have taken us to see that area. Another interesting thing about this movie is it has a very interesting homage to Clockwork Orange. There is a scene where Jack Black, Jables, is on a park bench sleeping because he's homeless, and these four guys come up in those white masks, all talking in this weird British accent. And I only say weird British accent because it's not a good British accent, but it's basically a reference to the ultraviolence in Clockwork Orange from 1971. And so another interesting fact that I did not know when I first watched this movie, and when I first watched it years ago, and I kind of noticed it this time. I was like, well, that looks really familiar. Well, the club where the open mic night is and where the open mic contest is, and the parking lot where they have the big rock off at the very end, that club is an actual building. It was not shot in the soundstage. It was an actual building, and that parking lot looks familiar if anybody has seen the show True Blood, because that parking lot and building is the building that they used for Fantasia in True Blood, the vampire bar owned by Eric. Okay, now let's get into some of the cast real quick. Obviously, Jack Black and Kyle Gass are playing themselves in the film, but there's a lot of cameos and smaller bit parts that are from some famous people pop up in this film, and it's interesting to see them pop up. For instance, Ronnie James Dio playing himself, rest in peace. Comedian Paul F. Tompkins plays the host of the open mic night, and spoiler alert, ends up being the devil. Troy Gentile plays Little JB. You may not recognize him in this movie, but if anybody who's seen the Goldbergs, he plays Barry, the older brother in the Goldbergs. Ned Bellamy and Fred Armisen play security guards at the Rock and Roll History Museum, and in a super hilarious little bit part, Amy Poehler plays a truck stop waitress who is just so funny, and it's actually one of the funniest parts of that movie, or of that scene of the movie, followed only by Tim Robbins as the stranger. He is so hilarious in this role, and Tim Robbins is not someone I find to be funny all that often, but he was super funny in this one. Satan himself, played by Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters and of course Nirvana. Ben Stiller, who actually produced the movie, plays a employee at a Guitar Center who tells them all about the Pick of Destiny. What else do we have? Who else we got? Colin Hanks has a very small bit part in it as a drunken frat dude. Amy Adams, very small part. She is labeled as Gorgeous Woman, which she is. And finally, we have just a few people that are kind of uncredited in there, so you really have to, you got to look kind of deep to be able to find them, since they're not credited. But David Krumholtz is in it, of Numbers, and Meatloaf, of course, plays Jack Black's dad in the movie, and that is one of the funnier parts of it, because he's this really staunch Christian dad who is saying, you know, the rock and roll is the devil's music, and you know, you're never going to amount to anything, and if you play this, you know, you must be, you know, if only way you can live in this home and enjoy music is it cannot be rock and roll. And I just think that's so funny coming from somebody who was, you know, such a huge musician in the 70s and 80s, and whose albums, you know, Bad Out of Hell, Bad Out of Hell 2, Bad Out of Hell 3, and you're turning around and playing this. That's what just makes it so much funnier. There's a scene at the beginning where he tears down all these rock posters. He destroys a Meatloaf statue. So funny. John C. Reilly is uncredited, but he plays Sasquatch in it. And the Sasquatch sequence is one of the greatest sequences in the entire movie. Basically, Jack Black finds some magic mushrooms, and it's just, he gets so high, he starts tripping balls, and it's just really funny. Out of all the get high and have an alternate experience in movies, this is one of my most favorite ones, because just the songs that he sings, especially in this scene, is just, it's so funny. And let me talk about the music really quick. All the songs on the soundtrack are hilarious, and obviously because it's Tenacious D. So, so that was my review of Tenacious D. I know it was kind of choppy. I'm sorry. I could not get into a rhythm this time around. But I'm a little out of practice on these movie reviews. So I promise you, as these move on, these will get better. But Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny, if you haven't watched it, give it a shot, especially if you're a fan of Tenacious D. It's real great stuff. So thanks for watching. Blessed be.